Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb, and today we are building a lore-accurate Noctis. If you guys are looking for a more powerful build, I did knock out a cedh version, so if you guys are looking for high synergy, very powerful magic deck, you guys can go check that out. Today we're focusing around a more lore-accurate version of him, and he was able to actually summon weapons from phantoms in the game, so we're going to take a Voltron approach in Esper colors, which is honestly super powerful. It's just that there's a lot of other powerful things you can be doing in Esper, so Voltron kind of takes a backseat. It's kind of fun to just focus on a Voltron deck with a super powerful commander though, so if that's what you're looking for, that's what this deck tech is going to be on. Noctis actually allows us to play weapons from our graveyard, which is kind of like bringing them back, if you will. So it is flavor-wise pretty cool that I never realized that until I did some research on the character, and the character is pretty badass. I'm not going to do any spoilers. I don't think we need to do that here, but there is some other things that kind of incentivize, or not incentivize, but insinuate time travel. So we are going to be including some extra turn spells as well, because let's face it, without extra combat steps, killing an entire table with Voltron and Esper is going to be a lofty task. So we're going to use extra turn spells to kind of speed that up. We're not going to use them in an obnoxious way though, that's casting an extra turn spell and just drawing a card and playing an extra land. They are going to be our game enders here. So as soon as you see one hit the stack, you're probably going to win pretty quick, so your opponents are probably not going to get super annoyed with you. But like I said, probably. Some people just get super salty whenever they see an extra turn spell. But again, if that sounds like a deck tech you guys want to get into, let's get right into it. After you guys click on that whatnot link and claim your free $15. Additionally, you guys can get 50 or 10% off all of your Tolarian library proxies whenever you use code DT for D. And last but not least, if you would like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps me out. To show my appreciation, I will be replying to all the comments in the comment section down below. Now let's get right into it. Let's read Noctis real quick. He's a 4 CMC Esper creature with lifelink that says you may cast artifact spells from your graveyard by paying 3 life, in addition to paying their other costs. If you cast a spell this way, the artifact enters with a finality counter on it. Since we're building in Voltron, we really don't have to focus on the fact that we have to pay life to cast spells from our graveyard, because we're going to be smashing people in the face for a lot of damage. That means the life we gain is just going to help us pay for our spells. That being said, one of the best equipment in the deck is going to be Black Mage's Rod. It says equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. That's pretty busted because our commander does have lifelink. That means for every 1 spell we cast from our graveyard that's non-creature, we're going to deal 3 damage. That's going to gain us 3 life, effectively getting rid of his downside. We do still have to worry about the finality counter, but honestly, in this style of build, we don't have to worry about it too much since we want our permanents to stay on the battlefield and we're not trying to sacrifice them for value. Genji Gloves also has to be one of the best equipment in the deck. It says whenever equipped creature attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap it. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. It also gives our commander double strike, so all we have to do is get him above 10 power, and that's one-shotting a player. We can also create token copies of Genji Glove, effectively giving us more additional combat steps. Adaptive Omni Tool also super broken. It says equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control, which is going to be a ton. It also says whenever equipped creature attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. I like this here because not only does it find you your key pieces, it's going to make our commander massive. Nettle Cyst and Cranial Plating also have a tendency to make our commander massive. Cranial Plating gives it +1/+0 for each artifact we control, and Nettle Cyst gives it +1/+1 for each artifact and enchantment we control. So we're just trying to go wide with artifacts and one-shot people. The Buster Sword is also going to get an include. It's 3 CMC, 2 to equip. It says equipped creature gets +3/+2, and then whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you get a draw card. Then you may cast a spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to that damage without paying its mana cost. So you're casting free spells and drawing cards while giving your commander a meaningful buff. Speaking of meaningful buff, we're also running Excalibur. Fitting for a king if you ask me. This is a 12 CMC legendary artifact, but its cost is going to get reduced for each historic we have on the battlefield. That's going to be legendary creatures and artifacts. So this is going to be 0 9 times out of 10. It says equipped creature gets +10/+0 and has vigilance. Then its equip cost is only 2, which is insane. This means all we have to do is buff our commander up 7 after we equip this, and that's going to make him a one-shot. Sculpting Steel can enter as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. Notably, Genji Glove seems pretty good here, or any of our Nettle Cyst effects. Umezawa's Jitte, amazing, 2 CMC, 2 to equip, and then it says whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to put 2 charge counters on it. Pretty insane whenever you add double strike into the mix. Now you're putting 4 charge counters on it, and then you get to remove a charge counter, and it's pretty flexible. You can either give a creature +2/+2, you can give a creature -1/-1, or you can gain 2 life. All super meaningful since we are paying life to cast our spells. We can get rid of creatures this way to get rid of blockers, and we can give our commander a little bit of oomph to deal commander damage to kill a player. Key to the Vault has a pretty big setup, but once it's equipped, this card puts in work. It's 2 to cast, 3 to equip, and says whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, look at that many cards from the top of your library. You may exile a non-land card from among them, put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Sword of Feast and Famine is also going to get an include. Not only does it give meaningful protection, black and green makes a lot of decks just unable to block our commander, and then additionally it's going to cause our opponents to discard a card. We get to untap our lands, kind of like a pseudo extra turn, but we don't get that extra combat step. Robe of Stars is one of the best cards in the deck. It's 2 to cast, 1 to equip. It says equipped creature gets +0/+3, but it also says pay 2 mana, equipped creature phases out. Not only does it phase out our commander, but that's also going to phase out every single equipment card equipped onto our commander. So if someone tries to wipe our board, kill our commander, or kill all artifacts, all we have to do is pay 2 mana and phase out our commander, and our board's going to be 90% safe. Mask of the Schemer not only helps with the mill strategy, it's going to make our commander bigger, and it's going to give us some solid card selection. It says whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to connive X, where X is the amount of damage dealt. To connive, you draw X cards and discard X cards, and then you get to put a 1/1 counter on that creature for each non-land card discarded this way. Notably, we're kind of incentivized to discard non-land cards because our commander is able to cast artifacts from the graveyard. Champion's Helm, Swiftfoot Boots, and Winged Boots are going to be amazing protection pieces. One's going to give Hexproof, Winged Boots gives Ward 4, and then Champion's Helm also gives Hexproof, plus our commander is going to get +2/+2 on top of that protection. Let's talk about some pretty solid cards for this strategy. Mendicant is amazing. It's a legendary artifact creature. It only costs 2 mana, and then it says Mendicant's power is equal to the number of artifacts you control. So he's going to be pretty massive here. He also has the Start Your Engines ability. Notably, this can be triggered the turn you cast him twice because it's an ETB, and then you can trigger it once per turn by dealing combat damage to a player. And then whenever you get to max speed, which is 4 speed, it says whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 1. If you do, copy it. So now we're doubling up on all of our equipment, which is going to be pretty insane. With this guy on the battlefield, I have no doubt we can get to 21 commander damage in no time. I'm also running Phyrexian Metamorph, Mirror Image, and the Mycosynth Garden. These can be amazing cards to double up on our powerful equipment, or, double up on those Genji gloves to go ahead and get that little extra oomph you need to close out the game. Forensics Gadgeteer is also super solid here. It's a 3 CMC creature that says whenever you cast an artifact spell, you get to investigate. It also says activate abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate. This effect cannot lower the cost lower than 0. This is really good here because it lowers all of our equipped costs, and it's going to lower all of our clue sacrifice costs. So now it turns into 1 mana draw a card, and additionally our equipment are cheaper to equip. Plus it's amazing for those Nettlesis cards that are going to buff our commander equal to the amount of artifacts we have on the battlefield. This card's perfect here. Pure Steel Paladin is going to make all of our equip costs 0, while additionally drawing a card whenever an equipment card enters the battlefield. Foundry Inspector and Ethereum Sculptor are going to lower the cost of all of our artifact spells by 1. Notably, creating token copies of these can also have insane value for us, making our spells almost cost nothing. Karn Legacy Reforged is going to just be a massive creature. It goes without saying, but the alternate win con to this deck is if you can't commander damage anybody out, you still have to beat them to death, which is pretty weird for an Esper deck, but I'm here for it. So not only is Karn's power equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts we control, so if you're keeping track, that does mean we can take Excalibur and Genji Gloves, equip him to this guy, he'll have double strike, and he'll do over 44 damage per combat, so that means we're taking out 2 players there. He also has this cool ability that adds mana equal to the amount of artifacts we control to our mana pool. The only thing is we can't spend that mana to cast non-artifact spells, which is completely fine. Notably, we can still use this mana to crack our clues. Golbez can generate some insane card advantage here. He's 2 CMC and says whenever an artifact you control enters, you get to surveil 1, which honestly, as long as we're surveilling an artifact card to our graveyard, it's basically just straight up drawing a card. He also says at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more artifacts, return target creature card from your graveyard creature to your hand. If you control 8 or more artifacts, each opponent's going to lose life equal to that creature's power. Notably, I think the most life someone can lose is going to be 12 life here, whenever we return Karn to our hand with Excalibur on the battlefield. Cedh is a super broken card here. It's 3 CMC, it's a legendary creature Merfolk Rogue that says whenever Cedh Devious Diver becomes tapped, target player mills cards equal to its power. It also says whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard or activate an ability card in your graveyard, you get to draw a card and put a 1/1 counter on Cedh. This essentially says whenever you cast a spell, draw a card, because we're casting a ton of artifact spells from our graveyard. Not only that, we're going to fill our graveyard with this girl because we're going to make her massive. We can also equip equipment onto her, and then she's going to attack, and we're just going to mill a ton of cards. Borogoyf works pretty similar here. It's 3 CMC, he has Death Touch, he has Lifelink, and Borogoyf's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is that number +1. It also says whenever Borogoyf deals combat damage to a player, you may mill that many cards. If you do, you may put a creature card from among them into your hand. So again, more mill, more lifelink, I like it here. I'm also on Cloud and Stoneforge Mystic. They both allow you to tutor for any artifact whenever they enter the battlefield. Notably, 9 times out of 10, I am going to go for Sword of Hearth and Home because that has the ability to blink a creature whenever we deal combat damage. That's effectively going to allow us to tutor for 1 artifact each turn very consistently. So you can easily grab your Genji gloves into your Adaptive Omni tool, into your Excalibur, and start one-shotting players pretty quickly here. Especially when Stoneforge Mystic allows you to cheat an equipment into play, and then Cloud allows you to double trigger on all your equipment that is equipped to him. So if you equip him with Genji gloves instead of your commander, you're going to net 2 combat steps out of the gate. You're just sadly going to miss out on that double strike, but it's going to be okay. Desynchronization has to be one of the best board wipes for these artifact-based strategies. It's 4 CMC and says return all non-land permanents that are not historic to their owner's hand. So our commander's not going to get hit, and neither is any of our artifacts or equipment. Ugin, Eye of the Storm, is our late game plan. We're just going to cast this guy, and then we're going to get his broken ability. Whenever you cast this spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colors. It also says whenever you cast a colorless spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colors. You can +2 to gain 3 life and draw a card. The gain 3 life here, notable because that kind of pays for our commander's ability. Then you can pay 0 to add 3 mana to your mana pool. If you get to 11, you can search your library for any number of colorless non-land cards, exile them, shuffle, until end of turn you may cast those cards without paying their mana cost. So that's kind of how you win the game there. Or you simply just grind it out with a super powerful removal piece. I also couldn't resist not putting Displacer Kitten in this deck. It works very well with our clouds that enter the battlefield and search up equipment. It also works a little bit with some of our mill tech as well that enters the battlefield and mills us a ton. And it's super useful to not only ramp us a little bit since we can blink our signets, our soul ring whenever we're casting spells. It also is super efficient at getting rid of that finality counter just in case we do end up having to sacrifice something or something is about to get removed. We can kind of cast something and blink it in response. But also it's just amazing with Ugin here, because now whenever we cast a spell from our graveyard, it blinks Ugin and we get to activate his +1 ability again. That's going to gain us 3 life and draw a card. So now it kind of says whenever you cast an artifact spell from your graveyard, not only do you not lose life, you also get to draw a card, which is pretty broken. Moving on to the mill tech, I'll keep it brief. We have the Ever-Flowing Well. It's 3 CMC. It enters the battlefield, mills 2 cards, then we get to draw 2 cards. It also has Descend, so we can flip it over and get a pretty solid land. The land says whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by the Myriad pool, up to 1 other target permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell until end of turn. Notably, if we cast Gonti Aetherheart from our hand, we can just have a land become a token copy of it, sacrifice the Gonti Aetherheart, putting it into our graveyard, and now we have a land that gives us an extra turn whenever we exile it. Then we can easily cast the Gonti Aetherheart the next turn and go for another win attempt. This does take a little bit of energy to set up and a little bit of planning because you'll need to cast 2 more artifacts after you have something become a token copy of Gonti's Aetherheart, because you'll get 2 energy from the Aetherhearts, because the token copy we create will see the other Aetherheart enter, and then when the other Aetherheart enters, we also get 2 energy, so you'll have 4 energy, 2 more artifacts equals 8, and then you can take an extra turn whenever you exile that land. Again, a little bit of setup, but so worth it. I wanted to include the Black Overlord here as well. I'm so ready for this card to cycle out of standard because then the price will come down a little bit, but until then we gotta work with that price tag, and it's just so good here. We can either cast it for its impending cost, which means it's only 2 mana, it's just not a creature yet, or we can just straight up hard cast it for 5 mana, and then whenever it enters the battlefield we get to mill 4 cards and then return a non-avatar creature card or a planeswalker card from our graveyard to our hand. So it can grab all of our creatures that aren't artifacts from our graveyard, which is pretty good. Additionally, it can grab Ugin, which I think is pretty funny, and also it triggers on attack as well. So the mill here is insane and super consistent. The mill core is going to be Hedron Crab, Ripples of Undeath, Out of the Tombs, Cemetery Tampering. I constantly run these cards, and honestly, it's simply because they work. They come down early and they consistently mill. Secrets of the Dead is 3 CMC enchantment that says whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, you get to draw a card. We're going to be casting a ton of cards from our graveyard. Last but not least, just to cover all of our bases, we are going to be running Encroaching Mycosynth. This is going to turn all non-land permanents we control into artifacts. So now we can just straight up cast anything we want from our graveyard as long as it's a permanent. That's going to do it for today's deck tech, guys. Again, I have a cEDH list of this guy you guys can check out. Additionally, I do have a third list I haven't posted on the channel yet. That's bracket 3 and chocked full of synergy. So let me know if you guys want to see that as well, or if you guys are just kind of done with Noctis.